Welcome to Between Soul and Sky. This is a soul-centered invitation to a spirit-led, soul-inspired podcast dedicated to guiding you on the evolutionary journey of the soul. Here's your host, Ricky from the Star Whisperer.
Welcome to episode number 11 of Between Soul and Sky, and I am super excited to be here today because I have an incredible guest here. This is Jen Gannon. Jen, thank you so much for being here with us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And Jen is a certified yoga and breathwork teacher, and we're going to talk a little bit about yoga and its connection to self-realization. And so just a little bit about Jen for those of you who don't know. Jen is the certified yoga and breathwork teacher that I think we all should be following, by the way. You will learn a lot about yoga and breathwork. And she blends both the ancient practices of yoga with modern insights to help people connect with themselves and their purpose. What started off as a simple PE credit in college became a profound path towards her transformation, one that reshaped her body, her mind, and life from the inside out. With an MBA and years of experience across Fortune 500s, tech startups, and her own ventures, Jen also brings this sharp, strategic mind to her work. She's known for guiding bold, purpose-driven brands and individuals into greater alignment, weaving together wellness, creativity, and business with clarity and heart. Jen's unique gift is bridging the spiritual and the strategic. Whether she's guiding breathwork, facilitating transformation, or consulting behind the scenes, her mission is to serve those ready to live and lead more consciously. Her website is gannoncreative.com, and you could follow her at Gannon Writes on Instagram, all of which will be listed in the description wherever you're listening or watching this. Y'all can just get the link right there and learn a little bit more about her journey as a yoga and breathwork teacher and writing. So Jen, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here.
Definitely. And for those of you who don't know, behind the scenes, the way that this came together was really beautiful because there are so many different branches of yoga, without question. There's so many different ways that people practice yoga, and there's specific styles that in my personal spiritual journey are not as talked about. It's not like everyday conversation for me. So when Jen and I were talking about leaning into a topic together, she had mentioned that she teaches Kriya Yoga. And I was like, no shit. I was like, how? I was like, where is this coming from? And so I would love to hear a little bit about your personal journey coming into the yogic world, and where you are today. How did you get here?
Well, it's been a journey. So, yeah, my first exposure to, I guess, meditation was when I was very young. My mom had a boyfriend and he was into martial arts. And I'd never seen meditation, much less a man
Yeah.
practicing meditation. And I would sit and watch him. And he was really kind and nice. And he would go, "It's okay. You can hang out while I'm meditating." I was about
Yeah.
12 or 13. And I just was fascinated by how peaceful he could move through the world because he had these practices, right?
Yeah.
And then in college, as you mentioned in my bio, I thought I was going to get an easy A from a yoga class, and I drug a friend into the yoga class, and she was kind of mad at me because the class was learning Sanskrit and learning about Hinduism, and it
Yeah.
was really deep. And she was like, "This is not an easy A," but for me, it lit a fire inside of me that I it was a remembrance.
Yeah.
So and that started my journey. And my journey, on the yoga path was on and off and on and off until eventually it's just fully on.
Yeah.
So we went through a lot of processes about learning different styles of yoga. One of the ones that was really impactful on me was Shivananda. When I was
Oh,
pregnant with my son, I practiced Shivananda until 2 weeks before he was born. And then eventually, I was called to become a yoga teacher, and that was really the transformative piece. That was when everything kind of broke open.
I love it. I think it's so cool to see how it's been traveling with you. And I love the word remembrance. This is a theme that we talk about at Between Soul and Sky because it's something that is it really learning something new or is it remembering something you've always known that is deep within you? And so I love that you brought that up. Um, what I'd love to ask you, just to kind of get our toes wet in the conversation, is for those who might not be familiar, um, how would you explain Kriya Yoga to someone, and how is it different from the other traditional branches of yoga?
So, Kriya is a Sanskrit word. And a lot of times, I know you're a student of Sanskrit.
I
So, a
am,
lot of
yeah.
times you probably have picked up that you can hear an English word in the Sanskrit word, and that helps you like discern what it means. So, Kri is very close to create. And that's what it means. It means to take action, to create. So that's the literal translation, but you
Yeah.
could consider it kind of like a ritual action. And it's
Okay.
less about, the chaturanga or the downward facing dog,
Yep.
more about connecting to your life force, your prana, and moving energy through the physical body, but specifically related to the spine. So, there's Ashtanga, there's Bikram, there's Iyengar, there's all these different lineages that focus more on the asana practice, but Kriya is more about energy.
Yeah.
And so it's going to involve breath work. It's going to involve mudras, where you're doing the hand gestures that people
Yeah.
see related to yoga. It's going to involve intention, mantra, bandhas, which are like energetic locks in the body. And that's like level 2 yoga when you get there, but it changes your practice once you sort of dive into these things. And that's what Kriya is all about.
I love it. Beautiful explanation. I was looking, I pulled a quote from Autobiography of a Yogi, which connects with this. And this comes from Paramahansa Yogananda, and he says that Kriya Yogi, or the Kriya Yogi, the person that practices Kriya, mentally directs their life force energy to revolve upward and downward around the six spinal centers by neutralizing and alternating currents of inhalation and exhalation. The yogi can arrest decay in the body. And I loved that explanation
That's a beautiful explanation.
because it does explain this dynamic where it is really focusing on, like you were just describing, the prana in the spinal centers of the body and really working with understanding that. And so when it comes to Kriya, I don't know how comfortable you feel about the history of Kriya or the lineages of Kriya. Can you share any information about the history or the spiritual lineage of Kriya Yoga? Like, we're talking with ancient practices from India. How are we in the United States talking about this?
Yeah, so the practice of yoga that I teach and that I have studied is a direct line from that lineage. So it started with Babaji,
Yep.
and then it was passed down to Lahiri Mahasaya, and then to Yogananda. And
Yeah.
Yogananda, I highly recommend reading the book Autobiography of a Yogi. It's an amazing book, life-changing. But in the book, he talks about how the lineages are passed down, and it's very magical,
Yeah.
and very like fascinating how, it's not like someone went to a YTT in a class, in Fort
Yeah.
Lauderdale and learned yoga. It's passed down through these magical
Yeah.
encounters. And Yogananda was called to go to the West. He did not want to leave India,
Yeah.
but he was called. He had visions, and he had all kinds of directives telling him he must take Kriya Yoga to the West.
Yep.
And he landed in Boston, I believe was the first place in the 20s.
Yeah.
And imagine, here's a dark-skinned Indian with a turban and basically a dress
Yeah.
on
There's a
in
picture of it online, actually, I think, of him coming here for the first time.
he kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. And then he's
Yep.
talking about these things that seemed a little, risque to the people in the
Yes.
Northeast at that
Controversial.
time. Controversial is the word,
Yeah.
correct. But he persisted, and eventually he spoke in New York City in Carnegie Hall. He went to places in Colorado and Denver. He went to Los Angeles, and eventually he, I believe, landed in on the West Coast.
Yeah.
And he basically brought yoga to the West. That was um his yogic journey.
Yeah. Beautiful explanation. Yeah, I'm going to try to share that picture of him when he first comes here. It's iconic. I'm sure people have seen it that are
It's
listening.
so iconic. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it's that I believe he landed in LA where he opened up his first ashram in the United States,
Mhm.
which then became the Self-Realization Fellowship, the SRF. Um, and so I'm curious that of all of the different types of yogic practices that are available to you, what drew you personally to Kriya? What was different about Kriya for you that really felt a calling for you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, as I said, I was dabbling in yoga. I love Shivananda was a great style of yoga, and then I tried some other ones, and I had some back issues. And sometimes I would go to a yoga class, and I would feel like my spine was invigorated. Sometimes I would go to a yoga class, and I would feel like physically it didn't feel good.
Yeah,
And so, I kept trying and kept trying because I knew yoga was my calling, and eventually it led me to Anatara yoga, which is what I practice locally here, which is, like I said, can be very easily traced from Yogananda to what I practice. And I realized that the logical progression up the spine using these things like bandhas and mudras and pranayama
yeah,
and mantra opened up my body, not just my physical body, but the other bodies as well. And the benefits were just so much deeper for me.
yeah. I love that. I'm curious, so we're going to talk a little bit more because I bet there are some people that are unfamiliar with some of the terminology that we're using. So in just a minute, we'll get into that.
Mhm.
Um, and so one of the questions I was going to get into with you is how Kriya goes beyond the physical. And you were mentioning earlier that it actually focuses almost on the at an energetic level.
Mhm.
Um, and so when someone does Kriya or is interested in
Mhm.
them, where would we find someone doing a lot of stretching here and a lot of like those types of things? Like just to give people an understanding of how this could be different when we talk about focusing on the energy.
Yeah, and so as a yoga teacher, I generally don't say the word stretch.
Ooh,
That's a little insight. So what we're usually doing is we're either engaging or disengaging.
love it.
If we try to stretch, then we can actually make our physical body mad at us, and that's a lot of times where people say yoga hurt me, or my hamstrings get strained from yoga, my lower back, things like that.
Yeah.
So it's stretching. So what we're really wanting to do is open and allow. So yes, Kriya Yoga, in layman's terms, I like to say it's kind of like clearing out the dust or clearing out the cobwebs.
Yeah.
So as you clear all that debris in your energetic system, your prana begins to flow more freely. And as your prana begins to flow more freely, you become more energized, more vibrant, more connected to your true self. All these
Yeah.
magical things start to happen.
Totally. Do you feel like that's why, if anyone who's read Autobiography of a Yogi, he talks a lot about how he believes Kriya is an accelerant towards spiritual evolution,
Yes.
that he feels as if to accelerate the process of even burning karma, he would talk
Mhm.
about how through Kriya practice could actually help an individual burn karma and
Absolutely.
create better karma for oneself. Is that kind of why you would see it this way? Because it does move the prana and it opens your energy up more?
100%. And also, it creates what we call tapas. So that's a yoga term. Most people probably would not know, but that just means internal heat. So as we create that internal heat, we can alchemize. So
Ooh.
if we're talking about karma that has been lodged in the body, a lot of times in the hips or the shoulders, those stored energies or locked energies can get released.
Wow.
So I think that's a lot of what Yogananda was talking about.
Interesting. It's fascinating because I always say once you learn this material, you really can't go backwards because it's game
Yeah,
changing.
you
Um,
can.
so
And once you
oh,
see it, you can't unsee it.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
very difficult once you open up that gateway.
Mhm.
Um, one thing that I think would be important for us to talk about is because I know you've mentioned pranayama a few times and you're talking a little bit about that. I'm just curious if you could share a little bit more about what that means, what like prana being energy and pranayama, like what does this mean when you're saying these terms for people that might not be familiar?
Yeah, so prana is literally life
Oh,
force. So people often confuse it with breath work. Your breath is your bridge to your prana. So if you think about it in literal terms, if you stop breathing, you're no longer connected to this life, right?
yeah.
So, that's a very literal translation. But at a more nuanced level, your prana connects you, your breath connects you to a more vibrant life force. So what you do when you're practicing Kriya Yoga is you're creating these energy reserves, right? So you're getting more life force flowing through your body. And I use my hands like this because you will get into chakras in a minute, but it's kind of how it moves.
Yeah.
And as you practice Kriya on a regular basis, you build this sort of reserve. And
Yeah.
then let's say when life's you or when the shit hits the fan, you
Yeah.
have this reserve to pull from. And that's why people that practice Kriya Yoga specifically, or most kinds of yoga on a regular basis, um, have the ability to find peace within chaos, no
Yeah.
matter what's happening in their external world.
Totally. I can attest to that, even in crazy
Mhm.
moments. Um,
Mhm.
and having more energy, I find,
Yes.
when you need the
Yes.
energy to come through. So let's get into this a little bit, mentioning the idea of the connection between prana and the chakras.
Mhm.
Um, you know, let's get a little bit into the role of prana and the chakras when we're doing yoga, and specifically with Kriya. Um, I guess the question I would ask first is how do these connect? Like, you're talking about the flow of prana with our chakras. How do these connect for people? Um, and I guess, is there a way that we can make it easily digestible for maybe a beginner? Like, someone that is like, what's a chakra? Like, what are you talking, like level one would be kind of like, what are these things and how does prana move in this space with those chakras?
Yeah, so I love that. And I think even for people that have a perception of what a chakra is, it's always good to hear someone else's
Yeah,
perspective
totally.
that may open up a new window for your understanding. And that's how I approach any teaching
Totally.
of any kind is, maybe I know what a chakra is, but maybe this person knows it better than me, so let me listen.
Yeah.
But chakra, and I'm not saying I know it better than anyone else, but chakra literally translates to wheel in English. So that gives you a visual, something turning, right?
Yeah.
And there's many chakras, but we generally focus on the seven chakras, starting at the root, which is kind of at the base of the spine, and then moving up the center of the body to the crown, which is right above the skull. And so each chakra is connected in the sense that the energy is flowing, the energy is flowing, the energy is flowing. And then the energy is flowing around your spine too. So if, let's say, you have a blockage in your throat chakra. That's a common blockage, right? People
Yeah.
aren't speaking their truth. They've been shut down, for some reason or another. The energy can't flow this way or that way because there's a blockage here. And so during these practices where, like, for example, if you're doing a throat lock or you're
Yeah.
doing a throat opening, those things are going to open that energy center up. So now your prana can flow.
Totally.
But if there's a deep blockage there, it's going to, and you might even notice someone that has a throat chakra blockage, they have to clear their throat a lot,
Yeah.
or their voice gets shaky when they're trying to speak about something that's,
Yeah.
hard to speak about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Could this maybe even showcase as physical health symptoms? Like, they could, thyroid issues or, those types of
100%.
things. Yeah.
100%. And as a yoga teacher, I have witnessed, as a yoga teacher and a yoga student, I have witnessed people start crying in a yoga class and they don't even know why, like crying out loud, not
Yeah.
just like a little tear, but like just like a release. And a lot of times in the base of the spine, going closer down to the root, that's where emotions, maybe childhood emotions or past life experiences
Yeah.
can be lodged and it can be released. And then once it's released, the energy can move.
Totally. I
Yeah.
love that. Um, my other thing I would ask is just in relationship to the evolution of one's consciousness and the soul. Um, you know, I don't want to say it's common sense, but it would be assumed that you need to make sure or ensure that all of your chakras are, I don't even want to use the word aligned, but there's an open flowing energy. And so when there is an open flowing energy through the chakras, and prana can flow freely,
Mhm.
um, what would that look like in someone's life? Like, what would that soul's journey look like if they were living in a space where they were in harmony and there was a beautiful flow of prana from root to crown, from crown to root?
Yeah, it's so like I get the chills even thinking of it. It's so fascinating how much of a difference that can make in your life. For example, what is your biggest dream? You're on your wish list. What is like the thing that you're, in a perfect world you'd be doing?
Yeah,
You can access that if your energy is moving freely. You become closer to your true self. That's where the
yeah,
self-realization comes from. Become able to understand who you truly are and move in that direction.
totally. You just said something else that I'm curious. In your perspective and just your learning journey, what does self-realization even mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a long, deep answer for me. But I do think that we can spend our whole lives, and many people do spend their whole lives believing that there's something, right? Like aligning, excuse me,
Yeah,
aligning with being, let's say, an attorney or being a mother or
yeah,
being someone's wife or husband, but never really clearing that debris to understand who they truly are.
yeah,
So once you kind of get to that place where you're no longer in the mind and you're now connected to the true observer, then you can become who you truly are. And there's nothing more than that.
yeah. Thank you for answering that.
Okay.
Um, and the whole purpose of our conversation today is this specific type of yogic practice, Kriya Yoga, is an accelerant towards self-realization,
Yeah.
to remembering and becoming who you truly are.
Yeah.
Um, and so one of the other things that's quite common when we talk about Kriya is that there's often a conversation and a lot of um, research on this with Kriya and science, the science behind it all. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to give you some time to share what you feel comfortable with sharing behind, the science behind this actual practice. This isn't just a woo-woo spiritual practice. There is actual science to back up the exercises and the breathwork patterns and everything that we're doing. Um, to support the I don't want to say the claims of it, but it validates the effectiveness and the efficiency of the practice.
Yes, and so yoga is a science. A lot of people get confused with yoga, like, is this going to have some kind of contradiction to my religion? If
Yeah,
and of course, in yoga we do, talk and use Sanskrit words, and occasionally we do talk about things that are related to the Bhagavad Gita and things like that. But it is a science. It's not a religion. And what's fascinating to me is that recent mainstream scientific developments have proven what the ancient yogis were saying in their ancient texts thousands of years
yeah,
ago. For example, if you practice these certain movements where you lock the throat and then you open it in a certain way, they talked about the nectar of the gods flowing down the back of your throat that could cure all illnesses, and they spoke in these ancient ways. But now modern mainstream science is saying that actually, yes, that cerebral fluid as it flows back into the body can do wonders. And some of them have been proven to reduce the
yeah,
accounts of Alzheimer's and things like that. So mainstream science is catching up in a way to what the ancient yogis somehow knew.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And one of the things that I was sharing with Jen before we went on, just in my experience with practicing Kriya, when you go through your Kriya training practice, there's conversation about how you are not only doing this a part of your soul journey and your spiritual journey, but it's actually very conducive for the health of the body.
Mhm.
And I've noticed that in the time that I've been practicing, certain movements that I've done, certain pressures or certain breathing exercises have actually been incredibly supportive for me on my journey in health. And so it's wild because when I first learned it, I was like, well, let's see what happens. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm being told all these numbers, and I naturally question everything as it is. So once I practiced it myself and I was like, wow, this is actually magical. There's a magic to this, that this is why it's here. And I have such a deep gratitude for the fact that this science and this practice made it here, because this could have very well just stayed kept in private. Which shows you that there is a genuine intention behind these practices to help raise one's consciousness and awareness. Um,
Absolutely.
and so I love that. And there is so much more science to this practice. I just want y'all to know, like, if you're interested, please research it, because there's so much behind this. And there's a lot of, you could just go to Yogananda's website just to look at the science behind Kriya, for an example, because I think on their website, there's a ton of information on this.
Mhm.
Um, for me as an evolutionary astrologer, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, Jen, but one of the individuals in evolutionary astrology, his name was Jeffrey Wolf Green, um, received his information about astrology and evolutionary astrology specifically from Sri Yukteswar. And Sri Yukteswar is Yogananda's guru.
Right.
And when he received it, it was all in Sanskrit. And it all happened in a dream. And so a lot of what I teach in evolutionary astrology is actually derived from Sri Yukteswar, which is where it all comes from. And in Autobiography of Yogi, he talks about astrology because his guru, Yukteswar, loved astrology.
Yeah.
Um, Long story short, um, we both have evolutionary astrology and Kriya have a similar understanding of soul intention and karma. Um, and I believe in my heart, Kriya comes to you when you're ready. And I feel like for me, I've looked at it like an opportunity to, like we were getting into earlier, of burning karma and being able to work with karma. Um, you kind of got into that a little bit earlier, but I was just curious if you had anything to add about Kriya Yoga and its ability to help an individual work through their karmic imprint that they were born with.
That's a great question. I mean, I think that it goes back to what I was talking about with tapas. So you're creating that internal heat, and through that internal heat, you're able to burn away recent karma and
Yeah.
more deeper karma. And that is the reason oftentimes, people come to yoga and their reason is physical. Maybe they have tight shoulders or tight
Yeah,
hamstrings or something, but those physical ailments are often related to those karmic
totally.
actions, right?
Yeah.
And mainstream medicine and mainstream thought processes don't always say that, like maybe you need some kind of movement to release the
Yeah.
energy that's trapped in your hips. No doctor is
Sure.
ever saying this to you.
No. Yeah.
But when you go into a Kriya practice, you might find that all of a sudden this chronic health condition that you've had your whole life is suddenly gone or much less prevalent in your life.
Yeah.
So that is the experience that I personally have had, and I've seen it in so many students and fellow practitioners.
Totally. And this just makes me think of, not only our current life karma, but we're talking about past life karma as well.
Mhm.
Do you have any example stories that you could share of maybe a connection that you built with a client with Kriya, where you've noticed like the before and after effects of them practicing? Do you have a story that you could share with us that comes to mind?
Well, I mean, I have seen the transformation of many of my students through practicing with dedication, but I think I could speak to my own
Okay.
experience more clearly. Since I was a young child, was told that I had really bad back problems, and I don't like to say the name. That's why I say back problems, because I don't want
Yeah.
to give like life to the diagnoses that were given to me. And when I started yoga, I sometimes would find that it would hurt my back, like I told you in the beginning. And I would come back and keep trying. And eventually, when I found Kriya Yoga, my back started to move and in a way that it hadn't my whole
Wow.
life. And I had had chronic pain since the time of a little, like elementary school. And my back started to move. And I was like, whoa, what just happened? And it was this emotional release where I could
I was just about
feel,
to ask.
yeah, I could feel the energy of emotions that I felt like weren't even Jennifer Gannon's moving through my body. They were someone else's. And through that process of really leaning into the Kriya Yoga, I am now an inch taller. And
Oh, no way.
and yes, and I went to a doctor a couple of years ago, maybe like 4 years ago, and I was like, this is what I've had my whole life. This is an issue. And he looked at my spine and he said, that you don't have that. And so my spine is completely straight now. And
Wow.
yeah, and I hardly ever have back pain. If I go out and lift a couch or something, then I might pay for it, but
Yeah.
I generally do not have back pain anymore.
That's an amazing story. I love that of the positive effects of, and
Mhm.
like you said, being consistent with that, I think is super, super important.
Yes.
Um, and that is something that, I could speak to that if you do take the path of Kriya, and I love how you brought up the concept that this isn't a religious practice.
Mhm.
And one thing you'll learn if you do read like autobiography of a yogi, if you ever take the path and look a little bit more at Kriya, Kriya is very open to whatever you believe and whatever you think.
Yes.
It's a very accepting practice, I find. I mean, I remember learning it in the amount of openness of no matter where you came from, what you believed in, what religious practice you, everything. It didn't matter. It wasn't even a thought. It wasn't even a question to even ask. Um, and I know that even Yogananda has books about how important Jesus was for him, just as an
Mhm.
example.
Jesus was a
And
yogi.
and that's what the book is called.
Mhm.
That's what the book is. It's about how Jesus was a yogi.
Mhm.
And it's such a powerful thing because when you study different, like I've read one of his books about the Gita, and he talks about how there's a lot of people who are going to view it through the lens of religion, and he viewed it through the lens of yoga.
Yes.
And which is actually a branch. I think it's called a darshan in India, which is a branch of Indian philosophy, which is yoga. So they view things through the lens of yoga. And one of the lessons he teaches is how the mind or the manas is going to actually be a challenge that you need to take on. And you gotta work through the mind because the mind doesn't want you to sit in silence and stillness.
Yeah,
But you gotta embrace that battle. And literally, when you learn about the Gita, what is it? It's a battle.
that's
And
right.
it's an
Mhm.
internal dynamic that's going to happen when you start the path. So it's not going to be rainbows, buttercups, and butterflies. But when you are dedicated to the craft of it and you are consistent with it, you're a perfect example of the positive influences that can come out of it. Um,
Really.
which is why you teach it because you believe it.
Yes, it's a passion of mine. It really
Yeah,
is. And when you start to dive into like the Bhagavad Gita and then you apply it to the asana practice, just specifically the asana practice, it's so dramatic and creative and fun when you start
I
to really understand what you're doing.
I love it. I love it. I wish I could come take classes with you.
Me
Um,
too.
distance. One of the things that I was going to say is, at a deeper level, it's a two-part question. Number one is, in your view, when it comes to life itself, what do you feel is the ultimate goal of our spiritual path?
I think the ultimate goal is to discover your true self. And that is kind of like if you're not moving in those circles already, that might be like kind of squishy for you. But for example, in the Yoga Sutras, it talks about being present. So the practice of yoga begins now. And then it talks about yoga's ability to quiet the chitta vrittis, which is the chattering vortices of the mind. And that's what you were just talking about. And then the third sutra is then you are allowed to abide in your true nature, which is peace.
Mhm.
So I think that when you go through those steps, you don't need to do anything else. Then you're
Yeah,
you're there and you're able to understand that the thoughts are not you. The things that you identify, your avatars that you identify as are not
yeah.
you. And behind all of that, there's a witness. And that witness is your soul. And that's where you are. That's where the idea of you lives.
I, oh, this is going to be a whole separate conversation for you and I. Um, you just mentioned something that I think a lot of people might not necessarily be familiar with, but the Yoga Sutras. Can you just give it a small explanation of what this is so they understand what that, if they want to read it, if they want to learn about this, what is this?
Yeah, so the Yoga Sutras are from Patanjali, and it's kind of like the prevailing philosophy of yoga.
Okay.
And the sutra means in English thread. So it's kind of like chapters.
Yeah.
And really, you only need to master those three chapters to understand yoga. There's more to it. And I
Yeah.
highly
It's a
encourage
big book.
everyone. It's the main book. Yeah, it's the main book. Exactly. But if you were to identify with those three sutras,
Yeah.
you're officially a yogi.
Yeah.
That is like
Cool.
the long and short of it, you know.
Yeah.
It's deep, you know, and we can throw words around like quiet the mind and things like that. It's so much easier said than done.
A billion
And it
percent.
does require that dedicated practice that we were just talking about. Whether you go to a yoga teacher or you're in your bedroom with your yoga mat, one way or another, you kind of have to be stepping on that mat
Yeah,
minimum of 3 times a week to get to the place where you embody those types of things.
totally. And it's funny because it is not it's not easy in the context if you haven't started to develop the practice. It is difficult to develop the practice because if you look at it like at an egoic level, the ego fears elimination,
Yeah.
death.
Yes.
And what you will experience through the art of stepping onto that yoga mat will be a transformation and a death.
Absolutely.
And what's going to unfold is you have to shed so many different layers. And what there's something called sheaths. And there are different sheaths that we have to go through to really get it's kind of like peeling an onion layer. And like you're saying, it's like you're getting to stripping all of this down to recognizing the witness of who you truly are at a soul level. And I think learning and developing a little bit of knowledge, which is actually another practice of self-awareness and self-realization, is learning a little bit more about certain things. And so getting a book like the Yoga Sutras, for an example, could be supportive for you so you can start to learn about what's actually happening on the inside of you so that when you do step onto the mat, you're like, okay, this is what's happening to me right now. This
Yeah.
is my mind is doing all of these tricks to me, and I have to kind of sit with this for a little bit,
Mhm.
or whatever. Which I think would be a great question. I would like to poke your brain. When you first started, do you have any tips for people that might be stepping on the mat right now and are like, I can't stop overthinking, my brain won't shut off. People are telling me to clear my mind, but how do you clear an overthinker's mind?
Yeah.
Any wisdom that you could offer, just like quick little tips for people that maybe could help them kind of at least take baby steps forward.
1,000,000%. Yes, I've had students come to me and say, I have tragic ADHD and I cannot do Shavasana. I can't, like at that part of class, I will just sit up and, you know, think about other things because I can't do it. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, let's see. But my advice to them is always be present, breathe, and just flow through movement. And then eventually the body gets tired and then the mind gets less able to intrude.
yeah.
But it's hard at first. And so, sometimes I even, you know, think
We're
through my
guilty of it. Yeah,
meditation because I'm having a stressful day and I'm like, I can't quiet my mind. I can't quiet my mind. And I'll keep trying until I can. And that's, I'm a seasoned practitioner. So it also is like kind of just letting go of expectations that you're going to, reach some kind of nirvana the first time
yeah,
that you attempt it. Um, but I think the consistency in practice, because it's a methodology,
yeah,
it's meant to bring you to a quieter mind. And so if you consistently practice, if you're really doing it in earnest, you will get there. And I've seen those ADHD students tell me they will never meditate. And next thing you know, they're like, can we just skip to Shavasana? Can we just skip to that part? And they're
yeah,
falling asleep and they're totally relaxed. And like, I've even heard, you're the only teacher who could ever get me there. But it's not me, it's the method, you know?
yeah.
So if you're doing the
Totally,
method correctly, you can get there.
totally. It's funny. I had a conversation a couple of weeks back with someone that was studying Kriya, and I was like, "What's the goal and your intention?" Like, I just want to reach samadhi today, and I was just like,
Nice.
I feel like, okay, like, how do you share this gently, right? Because you can't if you have those expectations, you are setting yourself up for failure. And then that disappointment and that failure is going to prevent you from wanting to keep going.
Yeah.
And so to set yourself up for success would mean to embrace whatever miracles, magic, or nothing could happen. Is whatever that specific day has in store for you. And accepting that space of whatever is going to be, it's going to be.
Yeah.
Letting go of that control, I think would be something. So I love your wisdom because I think there's a lot of people that I meet that are going to listen to this that are like, I can't shut my brain off.
Yeah.
Uh, or I can't create time. Like I don't have enough time for that in my life.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like any thoughts for someone that says something like that? Like, I don't have enough time. I'm so busy. I don't have enough time for something like this in my life.
Yeah, I mean, and some people legitimately don't have time, like they're working three jobs and supporting, single parents,
Yeah.
supporting other people. And but I would say 5 minutes of meditation or breath work, you could probably eke out 5 minutes, even if it's in your car on your lunch break.
Yeah.
It can really do so much for you. And what is more important than your peace and your well-being? Even if you are a parent or so a caregiver of some
Yeah.
kind, that those people that you're caring for need you to show up with a full cup. So I would say I would challenge, like, what in your time is more important than yourself?
Yeah. That's a beautiful thing that I talk a lot about now. I read a book a little while ago called Conscious Grieving. And one of the things she talked about is to live a conscious life means to engage with yourself. And if you are passionate about wanting to live a conscious life experience, you have to do your very best to consciously set aside time to engage with yourself. Whatever that looks like. It could be 5 minutes today, but what will happen is gradually that
Mhm.
will compound.
Yes.
Um, and so one thing I was just thinking about too, Jen, with you is that someone that feels called after listening to you today, they're like, I want to do this. I want to learn. I want to do yoga. I want to do Kriya. But what do I do? Where do I begin?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that the best way to begin, and I'm not saying this in a biased nature, is to find a good teacher. That's
Oh, great answer.
if you have the ability, depending on where you live, to go into a group yoga class, um, that's a game changer. That was a game changer for me. And I feel, like you said, very grateful that some amazing teachers have crossed my path through the years. But if you don't have that, let's say you live somewhere very remote and there's no yoga studios, nobody to turn to in real life, then I would say look online. Look for resources online. And I'm sure we could post some things,
Yeah.
there's lots of resources, even many free ones,
Hmm.
that you can access. Of course, I'm available for virtual privates if anyone was interested in that.
Great.
Um,
They can
or
do
if you're
that through your
local,
website.
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And if anyone's local in South Florida, I can do in-person privates. But I think find a teacher. I think, even if it's someone that has a free recorded video, if it resonates with you and it, like you said, it feels like a remembrance, then it's right. Don't question it.
Yeah.
Just do it.
I love that you said that. And I just want to add for those that are interested too, just because from my own knowingness, if you if you want to do virtual classes with Jen, I definitely recommend doing that. Which is gannoncreative.com.
Mhm.
Um, and you could get in contact with her there to take yoga classes, or anything like that. I know that the the SRF, they have learning material online as well. Some of which is free. They also have a membership that I think is like $100 for the year. And then there's also a lot of YouTube channels. You could find the SRF YouTube. There's another one called Kriya.org. Um, there's another one called Ananda.org is another one organization
That's
that
a
does a
great one.
lot
I like
of
that one a lot. Yeah.
they do a lot of
Mhm.
YouTube videos and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Those are really you want to make sure that you get the material from people that received the wisdom or the insight from the right places. So understanding what their lineage is, understanding where their information is coming from, I think is really important as well. So I have two magical questions here for you that I think kind of tie together.
Mhm.
I know so many people who ask me this question. I just had someone the other day ask me this. How can you possibly live a modern everyday life and at the same time balance that with the desire to go inward and do these ancient self-realization practices? Like, where's the balance in this? It could be so difficult for some people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is a deep question. And most of us are living, we have not reached samadhi. We are
Yeah.
living in duality, right? We may have like our little episode where we get mad because someone cuts us off in traffic
Oh
or
yeah. You want to
something
flip them
like
off.
that. Yes, it happens, right? Um,
You're
but
human.
but I have always thought, and this is not my original thought, everyone that I've ever practiced with has said the same thing, that yoga is what happens off the mat. So what we're doing on the mat is kind of preparation for when we go out into this simulation that we call life. And with that consistent practice, we are able to operate with intention. We're able to press pause before we react, right?
Yeah.
So that's in between karma and non-karma. We stop and we say, okay,
Yeah.
do I really need to give this guy the finger, or did he just need to get over, right?
Exactly. It gives
And
you
then also
that
awareness.
pause. It gives you that pause moment, like you said. Sorry, I love what you said. I totally agree. It gives you awareness, you said.
Yes, well, so the pause is so, so crucial. And you can
Game
tell
changing.
when you see someone take that pause, you're like, oh, that person probably practices yoga
Yeah.
and meditation. And yoga is meditation. But it's also awareness. So as we become closer to our true self, we become aware of who we truly are. So we move through the world with that understanding. And you might know someone that's like so unaware of themselves, they don't even know that they're doing things that are rude or
Yeah.
divisive or any other negative thing that you could say. They're not even aware because they
Right.
have not come closer to themselves to see
Yeah.
what the avatar is doing, right?
100%. I think it's the quote from Jesus where he says, forgive those for they don't know what they did to you.
Yes.
Um, and
Yes.
that's kind of what this is getting into.
Yes.
I loved your answer right there because one thing I talked about in an episode or two ago was karma yoga.
Mm.
And the idea of karma yoga is the idea that you become aware that karma in Sanskrit is action. So what
Action.
happens is in every action that you literally everything that you're doing, you and I being here right now are creating karmic implications for the future.
Yes.
And the pendulum swings. And what happens is that in karma yoga, you become aware of which direction that pendulum is swinging. Are you
Yes.
creating positive karma for you in the context that when I say positive is more in alignment with self-realization and soul recognition? Or
Mhm.
are you separating yourself more from people? Are you separating yourself from God, the universe source? Like, are you in that space of separation? In every single moment, in every single choice, in every single second, you are creating either unity or separation.
That's right.
And so, what I hear you saying is when you do yoga, it allows you to become more aware of the actions that you can take that can support you with your alignment, with your soul realization. And so, I love that answer. It was chef's kiss. I'm going to clip that one for you. Um,
And I love your response because yoga means union. So when we are practicing yoga, we're recognizing there's even an asana that's part of the Kriya where you can be standing and you shift to the right, and then you come back to center and you shift to the left, and you come back to center, and you recognize that in the center is homeostasis.
yeah,
And so that's very tied to Buddhist traditions, the middle way. And that kind of thinking, when you go out into the world and start creating karma, is very impactful.
100%. Beautiful answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Um, I think I have three more questions for you.
Okay.
One is kind of a little bit of a piggyback because I think, um, we're talking about living in the modern world, but I wanted to clarify something is, Do you feel like self-realization means that we have to detach ourselves from the material world? Or through self-realization, does that mean a deeper participation with the world?
That's such a great question. I love that question because oftentimes when someone says detachment, you think, okay, I'm supposed to get rid of all my worldly belongings and live on the
Bingo.
mountain, wearing a
Yeah.
towel or something,
Yep.
right? But the truth of the matter is that everything is temporary and we are detaching from things. And whether we want to or not, things
It's
will
happening.
be detached from us, right? That's what life teaches us in sometimes hard ways. But the attachment doesn't mean that we don't engage, that we don't love, that we don't
Yeah.
feel, that we're not open to receive and live life with joy. It just means that we recognize that this is temporary. So
Yeah.
we
Ooh.
start to get that knowledge and that preparation,
Yeah.
right? And that's what the yogis say, that we're preparing for the grand shavasana. So
Yeah.
when we die, we lose everything. We
Hmm.
can't, they say you can't take it with you. It's really true. Like
Yeah.
if you've never experienced looking at someone's personal possessions after they pass away, it's kind of like eye-opening. Like we get
Yeah.
attached to these things,
So many things.
but we are forced to let go of them, whether we want to or not at some point.
Hmm.
So yoga helps us get better at understanding that temporary nature of things, but it doesn't mean we can't love those things or we can't, have a favorite book or a favorite best friend or a family member that we really adore, but we just recognize that it's not ours to keep.
Hmm. Beautiful answer.
Thank you.
And I think that goes as well, when you take this path, I think you're naturally called towards deeper, spiritual texts. And I think in those texts, there's also like an accent to all of this because it gives you the knowledge, or the wisdom to reflect on, to contemplate, which talks all about this. Um, and so, great answer. Um, my last two questions I have for you, the most
Mhm.
difficult questions. Um, we talked a little bit about the word remembrance, which
Mhm.
again is a key word for me that I'm loving right now.
Me
And
too.
my podcast is called Between Soul and Sky.
Mhm.
And so between the soul and the sky, what do you believe the individual soul is here to remember?
Yeah, I have the chills as you say those words. I think that we are, my opinion, my personal opinion is that we come into this world with it almost like with a blindfold on. The things that our soul knows, we purposely forget
Mhm.
so that we can learn whatever lessons we specifically came here to learn. So I think for every individual, it is different. But I think the remembrance is that we are the witness, that we are not the three-dimensional things that are happening. We are not the thoughts. We are something bigger and more infinite than that.
I love that. I think I ask this question to everyone, by the way, Jen. I just want you to know I always ask because I think it's such a great
It is great.
question that I think brings us all together. Um, and so my last question, this is free roam for Jen. If you could leave the listeners today with one message, one truth, a mantra, anything your heart desires, what would you love to leave for the listeners today that could aid them in their own journey of self-realization?
I would say, speaking to listeners maybe that don't have a yoga practice, have never explored any kind of yoga, I would say meditate. Start meditating. Find a guided meditation. Do it 5 minutes a day, a few times a week. See where it leads you, because quieting the mind is where you get to the truth.
Yeah. How often or how consistent should one be before they could start to really have enough data to say, okay, this is positive for me?
I think it's different for everyone. I mean, the
Yeah.
first time that I meditated, I had like a life-changing experience. So you could be someone like me, or you could be someone like my ADHD student who came to my class for 2 months and then eventually said, okay, I'm going to lay down in Shavasana now.
Yeah.
So I think that no matter what, it is worth your time. So if it comes naturally or if it's really hard, persist.
Yeah, love it. Great answer. I appreciate you, Jen.
Thank
Thank you
you
so
for
much
having
for
me
being
on.
here.
This is
Of
wonderful.
course, I love all of your answers. I love all of what you bring, and I feel like there's so much wisdom here. I made some notes when you were talking of some future conversations we can get into because I
Awesome. I
feel
love
like
it.
there's um so many different practices and wisdom and techniques, and just there's so much that we could get into. That
Great.
today my real goal was to really emphasize, yoga and Kriya are beautiful and powerful tools to help aid in the journey of self-realization. And so I appreciate you sharing your wisdom. And I just want to reiterate for everyone that if you're interested in wanting to learn yoga with Jen or study breathwork with Jen, whether it's virtually or locally in Southern Florida, her website is gannoncreative.com. She also is a writing coach. So you'll learn all about her writing coach and what she does. She does all sorts of different seminars, webinars, all sorts of different things going on to help individuals that are passionate about wanting to write books, poetry, you name it. Um, and her Instagram handle is Gannon Writes. So if you just at Gannon Writes, and I will tag her on my Instagram. And so feel free to give her a follow and keep up with her and see what new things she's got coming down the pipeline.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. I hope you have a great rest of your day. For those of you who tuned in with us, thank you again for being here. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to send me over a message on Instagram or wherever you're finding this. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.